Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to Neo Tokyo's official podcast, Interlinked. Huge shout out to our sponsor, Playa3ull Games. They are inspired by gamers and funded by their community. They have a epic game on the Epic Games Store, a third-person shooter called Nexus. Hop on in there and check that out. They're also currently selling nodes, so if you're interested, check that out at their website, playable.games. That is a 3 instead of a B on Playable. Now strap in for the rest of this episode of Interlink. I'm joined today by Jojo from the Castle of Blackwater team. How we doing, Jojo?
I'm doing very well. It is about 8 p.m. here in the Netherlands. It's getting dark nice and early, missing the summer a little bit, but happy that there are still people like yourself out there casting a spotlight on gaming projects. And yeah, happy to be here today. How are you?
Hell yeah, appreciate you joining in late on the Friday. We'll get you off to your weekend in a reasonable fashion. But as we
Cool.
discussed, all things considered, doing pretty well. I actually spent my morning earning Big Brother points by going with my brother to go and pick up as many of the new Pokemon TCG set as two people
Wow,
can. So we were
that's
having some
amazing.
fun talking TCG. I've recently
You got
gotten
some
into.
mad memorabilia behind you. I was just gonna say, like, what are you all into? I see some Dragon Ball Z there. What else you got?
Yeah, so all the like big box sets are all manga. So,
Yeah,
and a lot of the loose books as well. So got the whole One Piece collection, got the Dragon Ball collection, Z, Super, some singles for some other animes, and then I've actually gotten into the One Piece TCG of late.
oh,
Doing
is there one?
some, yeah, there is. It's
Is it good?
I'm not a sophisticated TCG like connoisseur by any means,
Sure.
but as a big One Piece fan, like I enjoy it and I get the double benefit of I'm currently learning Japanese, so I rip all the
Wow.
Japanese packs and it's been the most effective way I've found to learn the character sets. So I pull them out, try and read them, have my cheat sheet if I need it, and after ripping quite a few packs, like it's made a difference.
That's very fun. Have you been to Japan actually?
Yeah, so back literally a year ago, we were in Kyoto, and that's where this all sort of started. So as a kid, I'd been into Dragon Ball and like watching the anime, but went to the manga museum and picked up a bunch of singles of like Naruto, One Piece, Dragon Ball Super, Dragon
Yeah.
Ball Z, and the One Piece just absolutely addicted me. And at this point, I am one away from being current as the most recent one in English just dropped last week.
That's so fun. Me and the team went to Tokyo just over a year ago for our team offsite. We unfortunately only had time to do Tokyo, but I was just so impressed with Japanese culture and how ingrained the gaming culture is in there, right? Walking through the cities and having these little like gotcha games everywhere, and everyone just goes absolutely nuts for the little metal ball player game or pachinko, I think it's called, something like that. And
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, I love experiencing different kinds of cultures abroad like that. So yeah, we got that in common.
What were some of the highlights of Tokyo?
I'll tell you what I thought was really cool. So we did the Tokyo Tower, which is like the red tower kind of thing, and in there's actually like this kind of game hall computer center where you can play games and do crazy tech stuff. And one of the crazy tech things that they had there is where you would get like an exoskeleton robot suit put on your shoulders. Kind of like, have you seen that movie with, what's the movie called? You know, what the robot fighting? You know, come on, Real
Pacific Rim?
Steel. Oh
Oh,
no,
Real
Real
Steel.
Steel.
Okay,
Real Steel,
okay.
yeah. So it was kind of like that, but you have this robot suit on you and you've got these big arms and you're literally fighting 1v1 person to person with these massive robot gloves making all these moves. It was very much a highlight of that trip. And other than that, the karaoke was really great. And some of we did one night out there, which was a funny side story, right? If you've got the time for it. But
Always.
my co-founder at the time was going through, I don't want to say medical issues, but he was having some stress-related heart palpitations that were worrying him. And he had been going to the doctor and getting heart scans and really trying to figure out what was going on with his heart. And all they kept saying is like, bro, just stop working so much because you're just stressed. And obviously that's never an option. And the first couple of nights in Japan, when the team would be staying out late, he would go home because he was worried about his heart. And then eventually, on like the third or fourth night, we finally managed to convince him, like, hey, just like lean in, just like have the extra wine, come out with us. And so he did. He got absolutely trashed that night, like shots, tequila, the whole 9 yards. And the next day, he was cured. He never had a pain in his heart again.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
beautiful.
yeah,
There is something to like just being able to cut loose, just being able to have fun, letting go of like all of that stress. Because especially in our industry, like it's not a big work-life balance kind of industry. So you
definitely
grind and
not.
you
No.
grind and you grind, and that takes a toll on you. And you got to kind of remember to like sort of, I always say the big hedge is like, I always try and live most of my life like I'm gonna live to 100, but every once in a
Mhm.
while I need to hedge and imagine I'm gonna die tomorrow.
Yeah, especially in crypto 24/7, but gaming as well, right? We're currently with Castle of Blackwater doing some campaigns with creators in Brazil, completely different time zone. And last night at like 11 p.m., my phone starts bugging. There's some kind of bug going on, so you have to wake up, you have to get out of bed, you have to wake up, you have to find out what's going on. Call the company who provides our backend solution. Apparently, it was a bug on their side, and I had to spend 2 hours solving this in real time with the creators. And that's kind of the sacrifices I think that you make for being in this industry, and you have to really really love it because yeah, it doesn't get easier.
No, no. And it like adds some like there's such a mix where the fact that it's totally digital does allow for some really cool living. Like I've done AMAs sitting on a dock in Bermuda. I've worked from,
Cool.
Japan. We did a France trip not so long ago and, handling a couple calls while we're out at the wineries. So you don't get to totally unplug, but at the same time, the freedom to work from anywhere. I know my sister, her boss like literally is so in her life that if she's not working from home when she works from home, she has to get special permission. So if she's working from a
Oh,
car or working
yeah.
from an alternative like vacation home, like and in that way we're so free, but you're never totally off of the hook as far as like working goes.
Yeah, my last job before starting this was just as COVID started. I was in recruitment, and it was 5 days a week at the office, and there was just no exceptions. There was working from home. Remember pre-COVID? I mean, in my industry, it didn't exist, right? And then to go to a scenario now where I'm working from home 4 days a week. We still have an office where you like to meet one day a week, but working with people remotely and kind of completely adapting your mind and going from that initial expectation as like, hey, if I can't see you, I don't believe that you're working, and completely shifting that into finding the right people to work with who share a level of passion where you can kind of entrust them with responsibilities and then completely let go and know that their incentives are aligned. It's been a real change in mindset, but also a whole new appreciation for having a career and professional development, because I was super unhappy in my job as a recruitment, but now I've never been so fulfilled. Even though you're working more, you're grinding more, but you're working with the right kind of people, and the passion is all there, and that I think is what makes it really worth it.
Yeah, and like despite the fact that we have to, in a way, almost be on call 24/7, the fact that it is such an international market, like I do you're sort of forced to chisel out that time where you have to work out or whatever. And I'm like, okay, it's
Yeah,
okay that I'm
yeah,
going to jujitsu at 11 o'clock because if something goes down at Super Neo Tokyo at 9 p.m., I'm going to
exactly.
be on call. So you've got to really be like, okay, I've got an hour here. It's okay to hop in the sauna or hop in jujitsu and get that sort of, mental and physical break.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
So you guys actually have an office. That's pretty unique in this Web3 space. So tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so my co-founder and I, we are old school friends, and we always found it important to have a central space. We also do other companies together where we have more local employees, so they also like to use the office space. It's much closer to his house, so for me, it's still like a 45-minute drive, which is one of the biggest wastes of time commuting. That's so 2020. But I really do appreciate the one day of the week. I usually go on a Wednesday or a Tuesday because it breaks the week. Going to the office, and it's funny because I feel a lot less productive at the office, right? I productive at home so much, but when I'm at the office, it's not so much about getting the most work done, but it's about connecting, brainstorming, and kind of strategizing, and that is, and I think will remain most powerful in an in-person setting. So we do try to get everyone together, at least everyone who lives in this country, 1 day a week, so that we can really align those visions and have those good vibes. Because working remote solo is a little bit more, yeah, of a solitary confinement in some situations. I don't know.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Sorry, I didn't mean to step on you.
yeah. I was wondering, how do you guys manage that within Neotoke? Do you have like settings where people are in a Discord server, kind of like working together, but also doing your own thing?
Yeah, so most of it happens like relatively isolated. For like the Council of Neo Tokyo, for instance, we do have like a set once a week core meet where we all get together. We actually do the same thing at Superverse as well, where, that one time a week we all hop in the same room and, connect and be able to talk. Not quite the same as like all being in the same place, but we're so geographically dispersed in both companies that
Yeah.
it's, not really feasible. Although on the Neo Tokyo side, we have had now a handful of like IRL events where being able to actually connect and meet people in person. And I've had the fortune of, particularly like Ben Gothard, who I started this podcast with. At this point,
Mhm.
I've been to his wedding. We've got to hang out a bunch
Wow.
IRL. When I was
That's
living in
crazy.
Denver, him and his fiance at the time, now wife, swung through and stayed with me for a few days. So that's worth like 1,000 Discord meetings. So I really
100%.
value those times. And I always like laugh, like, when I was a kid, like the number one thing the parents were concerned about is like, do not meet people that you meet on the
Yeah.
internet. And now I essentially do that for a living.
Yeah, 100%. It reminds me of how growing up, my parents would always say like, "Hey, you play less games. You're never going to make a career in games. It's just a silly hobby. Go and do something real with your life." And I'm like, look at me now, Dad.
Yeah, and from like an investment standpoint, like me and my brother were joking around today, like there was such a belief like these Pokemon cards, these video games, like
Oh
are
yeah.
not going to be something that continues as you get older. And I think as things stand today, the most profitable investment over the last 20 years would have been to buy and hold those Pokemon cards that we were ripping and sticking in binders when we were a kid.
God, I must have lost so many Pokemon cards because I remember having it all when I was a kid. The fancy Yu-Gi-Oh cards, the red Charizard, whatever. I just have no idea. At some point in my childhood, they must have gotten lost as you get over it. I just wish I would have kept that a little bit more secure. I still have a Game Boy Color somewhere, an OG yellow Game Boy Color with Pokemon Red that I still cherish to this day. But yeah, much more was lost than was kept. I'll tell you that.
Well, good on you for keeping that. I wish I had like the purple clear Game Boy Color that was very
Cool.
gangster at the time that I wish I had kept.
Yeah.
And me and my brother were just laughing today. At one point when I was probably like 12, 13, like I don't know if they do this in the Netherlands, but like lemonade stands are kind of common when you're a kid in like
Sure.
suburbia. And we literally went to the end of our driveway and attempted to sell Pokemon cards that we had, which are now probably exceedingly valuable from the original set. And I literally had them in a plastic bag and we were bored and no one was starting. And I was just like waving them above my head and the bag ripped. And we just probably put what now
No.
could have been probably tens of thousands of dollars of original set Pokemon cards just like all over the street, getting
That's
like
nuts.
flung to the wind. And we're like, oh,
Yeah.
if only we had known.
Hey, hindsight's 2020, eh?
No doubt. I do try and remember that now, like when I'm talking to my little cousins, I always sort of like probe, like, what are you guys super passionate about? Like, what are you guys excited about collecting? Or what anime are you watching? Because I think those are actually really valuable clues to where like the video game and like TCG and investing space will actually go when they get the wealth that eventually, trickles down to them as they get older and take a larger percentage of it. Like, what are their Pokemon cards going to be? What are their Dragon Ball Z,
But
and the things that
is
the
that any different from what I feel like these days, Pokemon Magic, like all the things that were like from our generation are now reintroduced in their generation, or what are you hearing?
So like some like animes that like I wasn't familiar with were like really popular with them. Like some because like I still think like a lot of what's like propping up the Pokemon market. So like I was just sitting in line waiting for GameStop to open and like sort of chatting with the people who are in the line. And it's mostly people from like my brother was probably one of the youngest people in line at like 28. And
No.
most people were in their 30s and early 40s. And like a lot of those people who are super into it were getting their kids into it. So in that way,
Mhm.
it has like a longevity. But I think there's a lot of like, particularly in the anime scene, and we started this conversation talking about Japan, and I think Japan still kicks way outside of their coverage in, sort of exporting culture to the world. And so it seems like they're much more into like anime than even really like the average person was as kids from
Really?
our generation, where they prefer animated content over sort of any sort of like live action.
That's insane. Because I remember being young and watching TV because there was no Netflix or whatever, and it was just always Pokemon or Yu-Gi-Oh or Beyblade or those things. And because they were on, and then you consumed them, and then you became obsessed with the merchandise. But I feel like in this day and age, there's so much choice out there that you don't just watch what's on. You have to go and look for things that attract to you. So I would think that people branch out more and that there's a lot more diversity rather than everybody coming together around this phenomenon. But I'm wondering how your cousin feels about that.
So there's definitely some getting around like phenomenons and like getting like Labubus, I think were like a really good
Right.
example of like
Heard
something
about
that
those.
like went super viral. But I do
Short lived.
short-lived. Although, like my cousin just got married, and one of the gifts from my cousin's wife's friend was a like Labubu in a wedding dress. So it does seem to be spreading out a little bit. Pretty cute. But I do agree that I think sort of like micro-segmented content is really where things are going, where as particularly with AI tools making games and animes like more approachable and less like high cost to be able to create, I do think we're going to see much more specialized content that really resonates with small groups where I think we really lived through the peak of this. Everything got kind of focus group to death, where if you're going to spend, 600 million on a Call of Duty, it can't only resonate with a small group of people or you're going to
Yeah,
get
exactly.
carted out, or a Transformers movie, or this remake of the movie when we were kids. But I think we've probably seen the peak of that. And now as like people are able to use AI tools to make specialized content, we're going to see sort of this micro segmentation where you can have something that just appeals to a small group.
How far away do you think we are from a scenario where, people aren't creating content for people anymore, but everybody is just self-prompting whatever content they feel like watching, and it just all happens on the fly and it instantly caters to your every need and desire?
Oh, we're getting closer. We're getting
Yeah,
closer.
right.
Like I've been amazed because I got into the whole like ChatGPT image generation. I was even
Sure.
like using it to spin up like a manga that started with photos of my friends and the characters that were created off of that when I was like, made Studio Ghibli style or whatever it was, you could make a
Hilarious.
quick little manga. And that was 6 months ago. And now the editor of this podcast, shout out LeBoomington, is essentially working as a one-man team to make a Neo Tokyo anime.
No
Um,
way.
so that actually, I think he just revealed a couple like clips recently. They've been doing like an AI segment on Twitch. But
Yeah.
that's coming very close to him releasing the pilot. And I think, that's an example of the fact that we're getting so much closer to a world where, yeah, people are just like prompting and creating on the fly content that'll be created for them. Because we're already seeing it with memes, like custom
Mhm.
memes being created for friend groups. And that's such a low barrier to entry compared to like, video content or video games. But I view it as like sort of the first shoe to drop.
Yeah, and are you? I'm very amazed at Google's new Genie model releases. If you've seen those, the virtual worlds thing, I really think that's the next. big breakthrough in AI. I don't want to say consciousness, but heading towards like a better understanding of the real world. And just being able to on the fly generate a virtual world in which you can, well, now still with mouse and keyboard, but how long is it going to be until you're wearing VR goggles, you know? Um, I recently also, so a couple of weeks ago, we had our team trip in the Ardennes in Belgium, which was much closer than Tokyo, thank God. And we did a VR battle arena for the first time. This one was called Eva GG, but I know that in the US you have them as well. It's, you know, I've done VR before where you're just standing and you're using the controller to move, but this one was actually in like a 500 square meter arena with like big QR codes everywhere, and everything is wireless, and we're playing 5v5 teams, and you're actually able to like walk around this area and hide behind, like imagine playing Call of Duty but you're in it. And that was for me the first like click moment where I felt so immersed into a game where, you know, at the end of a round I'm sweating, you know, I really feel like I was in that war zone and sniping, and it's kind of like playing paintball without the paint. Yeah, and I think we're getting so much closer to those kinds of Ready Player One experiences, and I'm here for it. You know, this is what every child that's into gaming among us grows up to want to adore. So I can't wait for the revolution to take hold.
Yeah, I definitely think that's going to be something that continues to catch on. Like, and we'll probably see, some big breakthroughs happen at places like Disney World or Universal
Yeah.
Studios where they have the infrastructure to be able to set up something like that. Because I think that is like the most exciting sort of like VR like use case is really those ones where you have the room to like run around, the room to like play, because it really just unlocks this, add the haptic feedback and these really, really immersive, like fun
Mm.
experiences, which I'm super excited for as well.
Yeah, but so but you not everybody has that kind of space, right? I don't know because you mentioned the Disney Studios, it made me think about that. But they recently came out with this innovation. You've probably seen it with like the floor pad that has like the little rollers on it, allowing you to have that freedom of movement just from like a single room. I think that's really powerful, especially when you can also kind of use that to jump and crouch, and then the haptic feedback, some kind of vest that gives you an electric shock when you get hit. Like we're very close to putting the pieces together and having this available in your house. So yeah, I do think the next frontier of gaming, to kind of circle it back to gaming as well, is going to be taking place in the virtual world and is going to move beyond screens. And actually, to be honest, Nick, I think the whole VR evolution is going to be quite short-lived, because I think the jump from screens, and I think we're going to go kind of into VR real quick, but then very quickly we're going to go into brain-computer interfaces like what they're doing with Neuralink. And once that becomes more common, to where, you know, the whole experience is being projected straight onto your brain cells, I think that's the real big innovation that people just aren't talking about enough.
Oh, I totally agree. I mean, there's already examples of people, some of the first people who have like Neuralink installed are, I think one guy was spending all night playing Civ 6 or something
Crazy.
like that,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
controlling
Yeah.
everything with his brain. And even how that's gonna create a whole different layer for esports, because even with the technology in such a primitive state today, we've already reached the point where people using brain interfaces are faster than the inputs that can be done manually with your fingers. So
Yeah, of
you're
course.
not gonna be able to compete in something like Valorant unless you have like a brain sort of like intersect, so or an interface. So it's gonna be really interesting to see like how that affects esports.
Yeah, at what point I do wonder what's going to happen to society when we get to a point where it becomes so easy and so immersive to get into virtual experiences. I think we already see it with the upcoming of video games and the amount of people that have lost their lives to like World of Warcraft and stuff, and just completely losing sense with reality. How much worse is that going to get when that pleasure center becomes so engaging, so immersive? You know, we see it with a bit extreme, but like people who get addicted to heroin and morphine because it hits that pleasure center, right? Imagine if you can achieve a similar effect, but you can do that digitally with something implanted in your brain without any side effects. You just press a button and suddenly you get that instant feeling of pleasure. What's that going to do to society? Who's still going to want to be working?
Yeah, and I think one of the things that Ready Player 2 did really well, it was certainly not as great of like a book as the first one, but it did get into that. And like the whole sequel is about like direct brain interface. And
Mm,
the protagonist spent a lot of time doing sort of like what would be in the real world very dangerous in like, he's doing, shooting up virtual heroin or having like sort
Wow.
of like orgies and things like that because it allows you to live other people's like experiences as well as create completely new ones from scratch. So, I mean, it is certainly something, in my opinion, that's going to be abused, especially when you integrate, AI companions and where does that really like factor in with like real connection and experience?
Crazy. Yeah.
Because literally, I had the moment where Grok now has like a very cool mode where you can do speech to speech. So instead
Okay.
of texting input, you can hit a button and talk directly to it and have it talk directly back. And we had a miscommunication around, I was trying to figure out something about a movie and it thought I meant a different movie and it started cracking jokes and I literally laughed. And I was like,
No way.
holy shit. It was like just like one of those moments where I like put it down, stopped it, and
Yeah. Oh,
I
you
was
made a
like,
friend.
that just made me laugh. That was an actual dopamine sort of
Yeah, yeah,
human
yeah.
to computer like connection that was being created, customized to me on the fly. And it's, I think, relatively primitive to some of the things that we have coming down the pipe.
Yeah, I've had a couple of voice chats with ChatGPT. I like to do it when I'm driving. I just turn ChatGPT voice mode and I start like asking about business ideas I have or strategy ideas, whatever. And I think it was really good when it came out, but they really nerfed it. I was last time I tried it was when GPT-5 first came out, and that was absolute dog shit, and it would get so frustrating. Um, so I'm still waiting on that real moment where I feel like I'm connecting with the AI. I haven't had that kind of click for me yet, but I do hear Grok has more of a personality compared to ChatGPT. I got a bit scared. I once went on a rabbit hole in Reddit when GPT-5 came out, and there were so many people complaining about how their soulmates had been replaced, right? And come to find out that there are entire subreddits dedicated to people who feel like they have like cracked consciousness in AI and have turned this AI into their like soulmate and have sacrificed all their personal relationships just to be with this AI. And that really spooked me because it was a huge community. And I think that's just a sign of things to come, if I'm very honest.
And I'm really nervous for our generation because I'm like, in some ways, we've been conditioned to this through. I mean, I think one of my first crushes growing up was Android 17. And that was
Okay.
like from like Dragon Ball. And then I
Yeah,
think about like Cortana, and I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, our generation in some ways has been conditioned to this through older video games and older content. Like, how many
totally.
people are going to be falling in love with these? Sort of like AI things, and then you overlay that into robotics. And, one of the things that I'm the most like almost like pessimistically long is human loneliness. And
100%.
how do those two things like interact? And we already have sort of like a growing population of like incels that and that's with like relatively primitive technology that's not exactly
Yeah.
hitting the dopamine response or the serotonin response like real humans can. And that line is starting to get really, really blurry.
Now, a word from our sponsors.
What's up, crypto gamers? Shout out to our sponsor, Myria. Myria is revolutionizing Ethereum based gaming with its powerful L2 scaling solution. Think zero gas fees, instant transactions, free NFT minting, and more. Myria offers a suite of tools that are tailor built for game development, including game specific SDKs, a specced out marketplace, Web3 spiked leaderboards, new AI super tools, and more. All this fueled by a fleet of player run nodes that are a breeze to operate and pump out daily rewards for supporting the ecosystem. Plus, check out Meta Rush, the Battle Royale obstacle runner by Myria Studios, dropping very, very soon.
Now back to your regularly scheduled program.
Yeah, I think one of the countries with the fastest declining birth rate is Japan, right? There's a huge population crisis going on there because there's become such a big difference in, men and women and their expectations of the other gender. And the women are all getting ambitious, want to work, and the man just wants like a subservient kind of thing. So they're getting into these digital relationships. And I think that's a very big telling sign of what is to come in the West as we learn to adopt those technologies. I don't know. Did you see the humanoid robot from Xpeng that was recently announced?
I think I did see that. That was one of the like humanoid-esque like robots.
Had some very feminine features. That's all I say.
That is no
Yeah,
surprise. They know their
yeah.
market.
And it was so eerily human-like in its motions. Like it had a big Westworld vibe in how it moved, so human-like. And it was so extremely human that the CEO during the introduction presentation had to cut it open on stage and like rip off the layers of robotics just to prove that it wasn't a human in a suit.
It's
Yeah,
crazy. And then like
absolutely.
we were talking about VR, and I totally agree that I think VR is going to be relatively short-lived and it's sort of, as a stepping stone for this paradigm
Yeah,
shift. Something I think is going to have even more legs is augmented reality.
yeah,
And, you're seeing with like the new Meta glasses that were recently released, like the augmented reality on that is very solid. And if you think about when these AI companions who a lot of the calls recently, both in Neo Tokyo and Superverse, have been with these AI companion companies, it's not a big jump to have like a persistent AI companion through augmented reality glasses that now accompanies you throughout your entire life and can see everything that you're seeing and comment on it in real time. Like that is next year or two, we're going to have probably some really, really like close use cases that are, really starting to warp reality.
yeah. No, even here, I wonder of the long term success of the medium because I mean, to people who don't wear glasses, how convinced are they going to be that they're now suddenly going to wear glasses just so that they can participate in this augmented reality world where once again we might be a couple of years away from having this computer chip implanted that has direct access to your optical nerve and can just project things on top of the reality that you're already experiencing. So yeah, but I'm a big fan of AR VR. I really think it's crazy tech. It's the kind of stuff that you used to dream of when you were a kid. And I remember my dad always saying like, "Oh, if VR ever becomes a thing, I'm buying that headset." And now every couple of years for Christmas, we make sure to buy him the latest VR headset because deep down he's also just a gamer looking for these explorations. And yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it'll, I think, create like essentially or amplify into the real world what we're experiencing in social media. So if you
Yeah,
pick up even a close buddy's phone and take a scroll through their Instagram Explore page, assuming you guys are close enough to let someone in on that level, they're completely different worlds, even for like people with like similar interests. So it's going to be really interesting when that starts to permeate the real world, whether through brain interfaces or augmented reality glasses or a combination of the two, where even though you're looking at the exact same thing physically, people are going to be seeing completely different advertisements, completely different. Like I always
yeah,
imagine like towns or whatchamacallit, like the town square or like you could be in a plaza somewhere in Europe and you could be watching a Drake concert being like, that you have a ticket to that's going to your brain interface. Well, some people are actually seeing the physical world because they never opted into that. Well, some people are, watching a movie or immersed in like an augmented reality sort of like game. Like it's
yeah.
gonna create in some ways it's going to give human beings much less common ground because like not only is your digital world completely different, but the way you're viewing the physical world is completely different.
Yeah, and at the same time, though, I do think there's going to be a lot of room for a kind of counterculture to spring up and for people to really reject the digitalness. And I think over time, as we get increasingly more digitalized, I think more and more people will also just crave naturalized experiences, right? And especially when you start thinking, in the next 20, 30 years, as most jobs are going to get automated away by the robotic workforce, what is it that humans are still going to be doing in this world? And I think a lot of that is going to be around providing real human connection experiences and combating those yeah, isolating technologies, yoga retreats and dating cruises. I really think there's going to be a bigger place for that. I really hope that that's kind of going to be one of the last resorts which we can use to save society from collapsing on itself in a digital revolution.
And I
But
think
that's
you already see some really like early signs of that, where like just in our space, if you look at some of the larger like trading influencers or crypto influencers, many of them in between their crypto content are showing off their garden or, like a villa they were able to purchase from like crypto. So there's a huge like martial arts subculture in crypto. A lot of
Yeah,
the
yeah.
active like spots of Neo Tokyo is the jujitsu thread. So I think it's very
Mm.
interesting that, some of the people that are on the absolute bleeding edge of the digital world are also some of the people that are most involved in like and see the value in like the physical world and experiences.
Yeah, I mean, touching grass, right? Everybody's talking about it all the time. I think that's increasingly being thrown around, especially in times like today when the markets are red. It's important to go and touch grass and understand what's really valuable, because in the end, it's all just numbers on a screen, But grass, that physicality, that touch with human nature, go out there, go do some shrooms, go really experience reality for what it is. And I think that's always a good way to stay connected to what really matters.
Yeah, I find like especially the combination of like nature and like psychedelic use to be almost something that I now consider like a core periodic like recharge for my mental health, where if you're in the digital world every single day, there's something that happens where it's like harder, at least for me, to appreciate the physical world. And
Yeah,
it seems to be, psychedelics are really good at providing that neuroplasticity and like laying down some new grooves on
yeah, yeah.
sort of your brain and like how you're interfacing with the world. And I had one recently where the fall colors in the Northeast were particularly beautiful a couple weeks ago. And, actually spending some time and be like, okay, I've looked at these trees, 10,000 times when I leave to go to the grocery store, but like it's that old sort of adage where like a lot of people are looking without seeing.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I mean, if we want to get onto psychedelics, that's a whole subtopic we might need to do a whole separate podcast on. But I've done my experimentation, especially in a young age. These days, I quickly have a sense of, I always find that psychedelics work best for me when I feel like I'm looking for something and I have like answers that I need to find, and or I need to be in an extreme setting, like at a crazy festival and have lots of impulses. And when you don't have either of those things, I can quickly find myself getting bored in a trip and thinking like, hey, why am I doing this? What am I looking for? But there are definitely some parts of that journey that I know about, but that I haven't been able to find a contact with, that are still on my to-do list, like DMT, for example, which I've heard crazy experiences about. I don't know if you've been able to partake in that kind of trend.
Just for the first time in like, I think it was like 2022, 2023, I went down to Tulum and a buddy had brought a DMT pen. So definitely
Wow.
a more diluted experience than if you were to like smoke the actual like isolated. I mean, this is isolated DMT too. It's just like diluted. But yeah, it was. There really is nothing like it that I've experienced, and I've,
Hmm.
played around a lot with like mushrooms and LSD, but the the difference, and I love this Carrie Fisher quote, is like on mushrooms and LSD, I've never seen anything that wasn't there. I just see what's there misbehave.
Exactly. Yeah.
Um, DMT was completely different in the aspect. It was like inhale. I remember because I'd had the ability to hit one once and I was pretty scared. And so I just took like a little hit and just got a little bit of a taste for it. And so this time it was passed to me. I was like, big inhale, big exhale, and I was about to
Yeah.
pass it back. I felt myself starting to go somewhere, and I was like, I'm going there this time. Did a second round,
Nice. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
and
Lift off.
literally the next thing I knew, and we were at this festival in Tulum, and I literally do that big exhale. You get the mothball taste. And I just had a moment where like I forgot how to breathe. And so it was like intense fear. I'm looking around. I'm in a completely different sort of like pixelated place than I was before. But one
No
of my
way.
friends who was quite close to me, she was the one thing that I could recognize from the regular world. And she looked like a space woman and we were hurtling through space. And I was like, oh, that's my friend. I'm still here at this like Tulum show. And then the craziest thing is like 15 minutes later, it was gone and you were
It's so
about
quick.
your regular
Yeah.
day. And I actually had to leave everyone and I was like, hey guys, I'm going off by myself. And I just went to the back of the show and sat down and tried to like process what it was. It was
Yeah.
a very unique experience that, I would certainly try again.
And that's the reason why it intrigues me so much, because it feels like that next level. And I always feel like all the psychedelics before it are kind of like a warm up to get you to the real end goal, which is that kind of DMT euphoric going in through the tunnel and meeting the forest elves kind of experience. And I've definitely seen a lot of videos about it. But what I wanted to say is that what's really interesting is that a lot of people have this kind of like shared experience, and everybody talks about it similarly. And there are now studies being done in London by this professor who has found a chemical way to induce DMT through someone's bloodstream, but then keep them there at a perfect level. So instead of being limited to this 15-20 minute power trip, you can now stay in that heightened DMT state for like up to 2-3 hours and really come to terms. And they're applying that technology, as they're calling it, a technology, onto different kinds of people, from like philosophers to linguists, to really try to start to uncover the puzzle pieces that is this DMT world. And that just fascinates me, because it really makes it seem like it goes beyond just brain chemicals tricking you into a false sense of reality, and it's starting to go into the realm of an actual sub-reality that tends to exist, that we're now being able to tap into with this heightened state of mind. But yeah, like I said, it's a bit of a detour from gaming, but definitely something that I'm very interested in.
But it's interesting how, in some ways, it connects, and I'm familiar with those studies going on as well. But it's very interesting that at the same time that's taking place and has been taking place in our history for so long, the science is kind of catching up, where
Yeah.
the whole sort of premise of quantum computing is that it's doing those calculations in alternative dimensions, and then they're being brought with the result into ours. And the multi-reality theory, and like now how we're starting to understand more about how animals process the world. And like, is it so different than, being a bumblebee where you can see an infrared? Like, that is a totally different dimension that we don't have like access to. So it's,
Hmm.
very interesting that as we're making these digital simulations into these new worlds, and we're figuring out that there are multiple dimensions in the physical world, and we're getting closer to exploring these alternative dimensions through digital form, you also have this tried and true sort of like, in some ways, technology that was developed by the Amazons to be able to explore, alternative worlds that they've been doing for thousands of years. So it seems like a very, I mean, we could never complain that we were born in boring times. Let me put it that way.
Definitely not. And there are still so many questions and so many unknowns. And you read in the news that Sam Altman claims that by 2027 AI will be able to do groundbreaking new discoveries. And I really can't wait for that moment where we start to supercharge discovery and go much beyond what like these firm beliefs of old school scientists, and they're so grounded in reality, and everything has to make sense according to the Einstein formula. But I think once AI gets to that level where it can supersede that kind of closed mind thinking, we'll really start to see some big discoveries, and they'll be one after the other. And I think this next generation of enlightenment is ahead of us. And that goes far beyond gaming. I think it'll go, far beyond our understanding of different dimensions and all that stuff. And maybe even touches upon different kinds of religion, and what is kind of right and what is wrong. And like you say, we're not born in bad times, and if we're lucky, we might even hit that health singularity where we never even have to die anymore. We could live forever, whether physically or digitally. We could be there for the long term. So in that sense, I think we're very lucky to be born when we are.
No doubt about it. Now, we're definitely going to like put a bit of an earmark on that page, because I would love to explore those ideas more. Maybe we do a whole podcast, like sort of exploring some of those things. I've been really thinking about how, an alternative podcast that features a lot of people in crypto gaming, but isn't necessarily pigeonholed in crypto gaming, and just we have the pleasure of working with so many unique people that are, so open-minded, that I think those conversations would be very valuable. But since this one is generally focused on crypto gaming,
Oh yeah,
I will pivot us into
do it.
Castle of Blackwater, because I've had the pleasure. We had a game night with Castle of Blackwater in the past, so I've got to play. Maybe that was like a year ago. Time's been flying, but I would love to get an update on like what you guys have been building. What are some of the new things that, maybe people from Neo Tokyo who played a year ago could expect when they booted up Castle of Blackwater today?
God, so much has changed, right? A year ago today. I think if we look at where we are today, I think it's very much a polished game. It's one that we're proud that is out and live. And yeah, we're still doing content updates in the form of new characters and stuff. But I think the core foundation of the game, with all of its customized settings, you can do private lobbies and change all the settings to really fit what you and your group needs. We have 14 unique roles, so every game is a little bit different as well. Adding the new roles just keeps it really fresh, and it changes the entire meta with every role that you add. We really recently added someone called the wild card, which is a neutral role whose objective it is to get themselves voted out. And that just completely changed the entire dynamic of the game, because now suddenly everyone can be distrusted with this sense of like, hey, maybe they are being truthful, but maybe they are just trying to get themselves voted out, etc. We also did big updates to the lighting engine, so everything just looks more clean. And all in all, it's just a finished game. So right now, our real focus is on marketing and community growth. We're working a lot with content creators, currently doing campaigns in Brazil, where the game seems to be doing really well, and Brazilian people really connect with the game. We also have some fun engagement systems, like a daily login system where you can get cosmetics just for showing up. We have a Wheel of Fortune, little wink to our crypto community, where you can spin a free wheel and a little bit of that gambling drive to see if you hit what you need. And yeah, all in all, now is a period of trying to get growth and really trying to get that game off the ground, because as a free to play game, getting that scale, especially at multiplayer, is going to be crucial to its long term success. And that is the challenge that we find ourselves in as we kind of navigate between trying to attract a Web2 gaming audience who tends to actually play the game more, while still satisfying a Web3 community where our roots lay in, who want to see the game and the company succeed.
And just so the podcast can stand on its own, and for any new people that weren't able to participate in the game, so maybe give like a little bit of an overview of what the core loop is, what the premise of the game is.
Yeah, the quickest overview is Castle of Blackwater is a social deduction game. The easiest comparison is Among Us, which everybody has kind of played. And the core thesis is that we wanted it to feel vibrant and exciting like Among Us, with the freedom of movement and the tasks that you can do. But we just wanted to make it more fun and better in every way. So our tasks are more like mini games that are actually fun if you have to play them over and over again. We also introduce many different roles that have abilities, both active and passive. So that really adds a spin to the different characters you can play. We also have 3 different factions. So we have the good guys, we have the bad guys, and the neutral guys. We also work with a day-night cycle, which keeps the game a bit more fresh. And we also add a lot more mechanics that really allow you to do the detective work. Like when you find a dead body, you can see fingerprints from all the people that have touched that body. And we have a little pin board, which is like a UI system where you can drag the little cards and the pins around. So a lot of those systems that really help you feel like a detective and almost make it play a bit like an escape room of whodunit, really. And game lasts about 10 to 15 minutes. You can play with minimum 5 people, maximum 10 currently. And it's just a hoot. If you look at some of our content online, we're all over TikTok, YouTube Shorts, etc. Every single game, I'm just rolling on the floor. Even now, after almost 4 years, I'm still enjoying every game that I play, and I think that really says enough.
Yeah, and I'd love to, especially for, we have a big audience of other founders, other people who aspire to build games themselves over this 4-year period in such a tumultuous like market cycle and ups and downs of like crypto gaming and changes to the game itself. What are some of the big like sort of core lessons that you've sort of taken from this entire development cycle and over the last 4 years in crypto gaming?
So many lessons, so mmany years. I think validate before you build is a big one. The first versions of the game, like we started off with this big GDD of all these game design ideas that we thought we were going to be great, and then you end up building them, and then people play them, and you see people in a natural setting, and you realize just how stupid it was what you thought. And if, especially in the early days, nowadays we're way better at it, but if you were to instead like connect with the community and ask them about it and give them options, and maybe build an earlier prototype before polishing everything, that'll give you a lot more direction. So really building with a community actively and constantly validating all of your hypotheses is a big one. Other than that, Yeah, finding the right team. I think a lot of entrepreneurs will say it, but finding the right people, and we've been through great hires and bad hires, and the great ones, they have been with us along the entire way, and they never really leave. But you're also going to meet some rotten apples along the way, especially when you're building a remote company where you really have to trust people. And it's very important to give everyone an opportunity to prove themselves, especially even through a couple of mistakes. It all happens. I'm personally believe that everybody should get at least 3 months to prove themselves, because you really need that amount of time to get to know someone. But if after 3 months they're still making the same mistakes and they're still frustrating you, instantly cut them off and go and move on with your life, because otherwise they can become an anchor really quickly and really start to bring down the motivation of the more passionate people. And that's a waste of time.
Yeah, especially the jaded apples, that's something that like we've been definitely dealing with in Neo Tokyo. How do you like not allow the jaded people to sort of like affect the new enthusiastic like people that are coming in? I think that's a big challenge. The other
That's
thing I'd
tough.
be super curious on your experience with is like how you sort of like categorize and filter feedback. Because as you said, you have the roots in Web3, but you also wanted to appeal to like a Web2 audience. And when you have like stakeholders that have such different like perspectives, like their feedback can be drastically different between someone who, might want to see asset appreciation versus someone who's just in there and be like, hey, I'm playing this with my mates and I got no idea really what Web3 is. So like how do you sort of take the good from both of those sectors and not let like sort of one stakeholder group in your community sort of like hijack the feedback?
So we have been both lucky, but also strategic in that from the very early days, we always made it very clear that we weren't building another Ponzi scheme. We were very anti-Ponzi. We were very much saying like, hey, don't come and join our project or support our team or play the game if you expect that you're just going to be playing, grinding a token and then selling it on to the next loser who's going to try to get more from you. Instead, what our strategy is going to be is we're following the kind of Counter-Strike model where we want to get a game really successful, and then surrounding the success of that game, we want to create a vibrant ecosystem of permitted asset trading, and those assets will have real-world value. And when you pitch the game like that from day one, you kind of weed out a lot of the token farmers and the P2E players, and they'll go and find opportunities elsewhere. And instead, you find the people that really believe in the project, that enjoy playing the game, and that will buy and hold the assets because they think the game has potential. But their incentives will also be aligned with ours, which is we need to make this game as fun as possible. And the fun of the game always has to come first. And the marketability towards a genuine, more Web2 focused audience, because only if this game goes popular and goes global, goes viral, will that secondhand economy of assets ever have any value. So in that sense, we've been very lucky that both of our communities are quite aligned on that. We have had to tone down our Web3 marketing and communication in the channels, because the Web2 audience, unfortunately, is still very reserved when it comes to Web3 gaming. And we've had a couple of unfortunate instances where people like creators will join, they'll play the game, they'll absolutely love it. Then for some reason, they'll find out that it's a crypto game, even though it's very light in the crypto that we have. It's just NFT assets and then whatever. And they'll have such an adverse reaction to it that they will give us a bad review. They'll tell their entire audience to stay away from us. And I always try to engage with these people and like really understand like what is it that we've actually done wrong to you. And they have a hard time even explaining it rationally, which is always a shame, I find. But then it's just better to let those people go, because you're not going to convince them, right? If they have an audience of people who are against it, they almost become forced to be against it themselves. Otherwise, they risk losing their audience. So we tend to cut those people loose and really focus on the ones who are more open-minded about it. And yeah, just like you have to build a good team, building a good community is equally important. And we're very grateful for the one we have.
Well, Jojo, I promised to get you out at a reasonable hour. We've already done a
Appreciate that.
full hour. Do you have any closing thoughts that you'd like to share with the audience before we wrap up?
Just a big shout out to the Neo Tokyo crowd. I'm so happy to hear that you guys are still out there and that you've been kicking and screaming throughout all these cycles as well. And you always seem to come out stronger. And I think that speaks volumes to the passion that's in the community as well. And I've come to know you and Ben and some of the other people in there. And yeah, you really speak to a lot of the passion that the crypto space needs. So keep building, keep showing, keep inviting me on, and I look forward to all the other opportunities we'll get to connect in the future.
Absolutely. Jojo, I appreciate your insights, your experience, sharing some of your journey here and your time.
Nice.
And yeah, we'll definitely be having another conversation here in the future. And to the audience, greatly appreciate you all. I know, especially in these sort of times, keep your chin up. This too shall pass. We'll see what the future has for us. And this has been Neo Tokyo's official podcast. We'll be back with another episode next week. Take care, everyone.